Hello and welcome back to the Birdcage. It has been a while since I have been able to sit down and talk Kansas basketball, and it's been tough. It has not been the season Kansas Jayhawks thought it would be, to say the least. Kansas, I'm pretty sure the last time talking we got to talk about Kansas was 10 days ago, over a week ago. I don't know exactly when it was. My guess is it was after the Kansas State game, which took place 10 days ago exactly. Did we even do something for that game? We did. 10 days ago is when that took place. Since then, Kansas has done absolutely nothing except make us question our sanity. They get a home win against Colorado in a game that was closer than it should have been. Then they go on this Utah trip, which really, if we talk about it, versus Colorado at Utah at BYU versus Oklahoma State at Colorado, that's easy. This is an easy little bit of our schedule, a little partner schedule where we can get right games, some let's inflate the record a little bit kind of games, and that's just not what happened at all. They go on the road to Utah on Saturday and suffer one of the worst losses of the entire season up till now. You've had the blown loss against against Baylor, the loss where they gave it away. They lost by 20 on the road at Baylor. You have the Missouri rivalry loss. You have the Houston game where they failed to close out that game twice, losing in double overtime. And then Creighton, not necessarily the best loss in their schedule, not the worst. You lost to West Virginia at home. It's not pretty. It's not been pretty so far. You get pretty much shot out of the gym against Kansas State. It's been a tough season, and it shouldn't be. This is a Kansas basketball team who is, on paper, the most talented team in the country. This is a Kansas team who is coached by one of the best coaches in college basketball now, Bill Self. This is a Kansas team that has Hunter Dickinson, a first team All American kind of guy. They have DeJuan Harris, who's played 6 years now at Kansas, KJ Adams, who's made handfuls of starts for the Jayhawks. And this is the worst team in the Bill Self era. I wrote an article for the University Daily Kansan last night. I had to write the gamer for this BYU game that we'll talk about shortly. And it was rough. It was a rough write. It was a rough watch. Kansas suffered their third largest loss in program history. Not Bill Self era, program history. For those wondering, the largest Kansas loss is actually in the year 1900. 1900. Over almost 125 years ago to the, I guess we're a month away. Almost to the day, 125 years ago. We lost by 40. And now it's the year 2025, and the Kansas Jayhawks travel to Utah to take on BYU, of all teams, and get ran out of the gym 12 minutes into it. 12 minutes into the game where Kansas just doesn't come ready to play. We'll get to different factors on why I believe that is. If you had any doubts about this Kansas basketball team, or you had any glimmering hope left, that BYU team, or that BYU game, excuse me, did not help those at all. It was garbage. It was a disaster class, is what I called it in my article. It was embarrassing, and the players know it. Coach Self knows it. The fans If you didn't turn the game off, I'm proud of you. That's how poor this team played. That's how poor this game was. And what I'm hearing from a lot of BYU fans on the internet is, why are you talking about how poor Kansas is and not what BYU did to make the game difficult? That's fair because BYU played a great game. They did. They shot over 50% from the field. They made 14 three-pointers. They shot a very respectful percentage at the free throw line. They took care of what they had to do, right? Kibikato was one of the best players on the floor, if not the best player on the floor, I thought, and he didn't score the most points. He was just, while he was on the floor, he was just so dominant. And Kansas just lacked dominance yesterday. Yegor Denman is going to be an NBA draft pick this year. This coming year, he'll do it. And he didn't even score in double figures. And Kansas lost by almost 40. The loss was, I know I touched on it being the third biggest loss in program history. This is the worst. It ties the worst loss in the Bill Self era. And that loss happened in 2021 against USC in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So I don't know what it is. And I wish I did. I wish I did, but I don't. On paper, I'll fix my camera real quick. Oh, my light shut off. On paper, this is the best team in the country with great wins over Duke, North Carolina, Michigan State, some real blue bloods in the sport. This same team that we watched yesterday, beat those teams earlier in the year. And every one of those teams would beat Kansas by double digits today. Every one of those teams would beat Kansas by double digits today. Let's talk about what we saw from Kansas. We saw a horrific performance on Saturday at Utah. And that's a Utah team that's not a tournament team. At least BYU's a tournament team. Utah's not. They're not sniffing the tournament. Fast car just drove by me. Utah's not sniffing the tournament. They let Gabe Madsen attempt 13 three-pointers. To his credit, he had 24 points and he made 5 of them. Took 18 shots. They lost to Gabe Madsen, who's a phenomenal player. He proved it against Kansas. It was pretty much a 2-3-man show for them. It was not anything special Utah did. Kansas just didn't come ready to play. Hunter Dickinson, 4 of 12, only taking 2 perimeter shots. So he went 3 of 10. 3 of 10 from inside the three-point arc. KJ Adams finished with 4 points, and we'll talk KJ Adams here in a bit. It's just we're not getting anything. Kansas wasn't getting anything from KJ. And that's just been a common theme, a common factor. He's gonna do what he normally does, and that's usually good enough, and it just hasn't been this year. I'm not gonna come on here and say anything crazy about KJ because KJ is a vital part of Kansas basketball, but it's not working. It's not working. Kansas loses by 7 at Utah. Has a chance to show a little bit of fight against BYU last night. It was a late game, an 8 p.m. tip-off. Didn't do it. Failed to show up. Gets blown out of the gym. Like 4 minutes into the game, less than 3 minutes into the game, Bill Self's got to call a timeout because Kansas gives up an 8-0 run. They get a corner 3 off transition. Yegor gets a long rebound off a Zeke Mayo miss. Dribbles up the court and just hands it off. perfectly in the hands of a BYU player for an easy layup. And then an offensive rebound, which BYU got a lot of those. An offensive rebound leads to another three-pointer for BYU. Like, it was just one of those games where one team came ready to play and the other one just came out so slow. And when you play teams like BYU, who are damn good, they're a damn good basketball team. They'll make the tournament. When you play teams like that, you can't be ready to go like that. They weren't ready to go. They were lethargic. They were unamused. They weren't ready to play. They didn't want to play. And there's been a lot of speculation about the relationships in the locker room, drama, a lot of team drama right now, which Kansas had last year. And I thought last year was bad. And this year it's just been so much worse. Only two Jayhawks scored in double digits last night. I don't even think I've mentioned the score of the game. 91-57 BYU. Let that sink in there. First year head coach Kevin Young beats the brakes off of the Kansas Jayhawks, who were preseason number 1, and now sit at 17-9, 8-7 in conference play. I don't know what to say. Kansas was down 20 at half. The game was as bad as the score indicated. Like, it wasn't close for the entire game. Hunter Dickinson finished with a double-double, 12 and 14. Hip, hip, hooray. Cool. The only other Jayhawk to score in double figures was David Coit, Diggy. Diggy, who doesn't play very much. He doesn't. And if he is playing a lot, something's going wrong. He shot the ball terrific, 4 of 7. Hit 3 threes. But, like, what do you want? What's this Kansas team doing? Zeke Mayo, 6 points. Shot poorly. KJ Adams, 2 of 5 from the field. He only takes free throw lane inside the free throw lane shots. Like, no, not good. He finished with 4 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers. He did nothing. Nothing productive, at least. 26 minutes. He played quite a bit. Flory, he'll be coming back next year. Or transferring. He's not going to the NBA anymore. All of those hopes were dead for Flory. I'm glad he's going to come back because I think he'll be a lot better next year. And then DeJuan, 1 of 7. Didn't make a 3-point shot yesterday. Attempted 5 of them. Not a very good day for him. He also had 3 turnovers. 7 assists, pretty good. You'll take that from a point guard, but it wasn't good. AJ Storr, 1 of 5 from the field. We'll get that out of the way. Marquise Passmore, 1 of 3, but he was playing a lot towards the end of the game when it didn't necessarily matter nearly as much. Shaquille Moore had a decent game if we're going by the box score. If we're going by the eye test, every one of these players didn't want to be out there. It was bad. It was bad. They couldn't guard the ball. We talked about how BYU shot over 50% from the field. I'm so tired. I don't know why. They didn't necessarily even shoot the greatest from 3. They shot 38%, which is good. 39%, excuse me. But, like, that's not, like, blistering hot. Like, there have been games in the past where Kansas loses, and it's because the team shoots over 50% from behind the arc. This just wasn't one of those games. BYU just made 14 of them. They took 36. They made 14. So it's like, yeah, you got to kind of guard. And BYU's not the most physical team. They really wanted to shoot a lot of threes, and that's what they kind of got. But they couldn't find a way Couldn't find a way to guard Richie Sanders. Maybe it's Saunders. He had 22 points, 4 of 8 from three. He was on fire. So was Trevin Nell. Nell. I mean, he missed three of them. Like, he had 15. It was just such an easy game for BYU. And it was just tough to watch if you were a Kansas fan. It was one of those games where you just wanted it to end. And for a lot of you guys were lucky enough to where you could just turn it off your TV. I had to make sure nothing crazy happened. But you're just like, you're kidding me. BYU got 20 fast break points. I mean, you're not going to win a lot of games doing that, giving up 20 fast break points. BYU also had 32 points in the paint, which is more than Kansas, but I guess if you're going to win a game by almost 40, that would make sense. The team just barely played with heart and effort. And it's one of those games where you would love to say that it's been the worst game that Kansas has played, but they've got some games up there that will make you question that. At Baylor, they blow a 20-point lead against Houston. They should have won that game twice. It's a top 10 team in Houston. Should have beat twice. You let that slip through your fingers. You lose to I will say, a very hot Kansas State team, but at the end of the day, it's K-State. And now you're just shaking your head because there's 5 games left. All right, if we look at the remaining schedule, you host Oklahoma State, and then you travel to Colorado. That's going to be a hard game. And then Saturday, you play Texas Tech. And then you play at Houston. At Houston. And versus Arizona. So it's like there are no gimme games left on the schedule. You can make a case for Oklahoma State and maybe Colorado, but then again, Colorado is not a gimme. We're traveling on the road, and we showed that we can't play Kansas basketball on the road. And maybe this team in general just hasn't been able to play Kansas basketball all season. But that's not a gimme either. You host Tech, tournament team. They were second in the Big 12, and then they fell yesterday to TCU. You go to Houston, who is a top 5 team in the country, the best team in the Big 12. And then you have to host Arizona, who were handing out quad 1 wins earlier in the year. But that's a team that's finally got the wheels back on the track, and they're playing good basketball. They're going to be a top 6, 7 seed in the tournament, depending on how everything falls. They might even be way higher. They could be a 3-4. So you're just sitting there and you're just like, are you serious? This Kansas team that lost to BYU by 40 and lost on the road to Utah was the same Kansas team that beat Michigan State by 8, beat Duke by 3. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. We knew that this Kansas team was not necessarily flawless. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But we didn't think that this was what it was. We knew this Kansas team was struggling putting it together. We knew Storr and Griffin and Coit and KJ were kind of struggling to find their roles on this team. And maybe I'm just speaking out of my butt, but it looks like none of them have figured it out. Rylan Griffin played a pretty good game, but the bench contribution, 31 bench points for Kansas. I don't know how accurate that necessarily is because Kansas went to their bench early because they were down by 40. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we don't know what this team is. They're lacking a leader. They're lacking an identity. Bill Self said in his press conference that they just need to get away from each other. This trip hasn't been what he wanted it to be. And I saw something on the internet that's like Kansas before Dickinson in the Self era was like 85 something ish win percentage. And then when Dickinson came in, it was upper 60%. And so you're just like, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. What is this team? Because that was disgusting. We've seen highs, we've seen lows, and this is as low as it goes for KU and Bill Self. I'm Jack Kenna, and that's pretty much all I have for this episode of the Birdcage. Kansas needs to figure it out. They host Oklahoma State on Saturday, and hopefully that is a get right game. Fingers crossed. This team has a lot of question marks and a big 5 game stretch ahead of the Big 12 tournament. So they got to do what they can to get right because there's going to be no helping them come March. I will be back, hopefully, with a friend for a later episode talking about KU hoops. I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. I will leave a link to my social medias, my UDK article if you want to go check it out. Appreciate you guys for taking a listen, and I'll see you guys later.